Okay, we are learning the Nishmas Mendel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain. I like this as boxes to tell me that I'm centered or not. I like it. Okay. Okay, much more sophisticated than my phone. Okay. We're learning the Nishmas Mendel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain and Misham Shavaliyah. We are up to Perek Yotes, the 19th chapter. We're going to begin by discussing a number of halachos and discussions about bris milah. So we're on Kuf Lamed Amud Aleph, right at the top of the Amud. Here we go. Rabbi Eliezer says, Im lo hevi kli me'erev Shabbos. If a person did not bring, so actually start before we start the Mishnah, there is a mitzvah, we saw this already earlier, that when bris milah and Shabbos coincide, then bris milah, although there are a number of malachos that could and will be done during bris milah, that overrides the laws of Shabbos. If it's the 8th day of Shabbos, then you must do the bris milah on Shabbos. You don't push it off. That's the halacha. There's always historically been, over the past 200 years or so, especially in America, maybe 100 years, there's been a lot of interesting shilas of people who wanted to have the bris milah, like if Shabbos wasn't convenient for them, or whatever. They'd like to do it a day early, or do it on a Sunday, or do it a day late because I want to do it on a Sunday. I wanted to have my guests over there. And been some interesting discussions among the poskim about how to deal with people who wanted to have a bris milah, but they were not observant enough that they wanted to do it at the right time and what to do. Okay, fine. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, so im lo hevi kli me'erev Shabbos, person did not bring their instrument for circumcising, meaning the knife, before Shabbos, meviu m'Shabbos megula, then you could bring it, even though it's carrying, and we'll discuss exactly the extent of the carrying later on, but meviu b'Shabbos megula, a person's allowed to bring it, but it should be brought uncovered, okay, and we'll come back to what the reason for that is, but you don't put it in a bag, you walk around with a knife, okay, it's not, you won't get arrested, but you walk around with a knife, okay, v'sakana mechasel pi edim, if it's a time of danger, there are times, as we know, that bris milah was forbidden, then you should cover it, but don't cover it privately, cover it in the presence of witnesses, okay? And that would presume, what the goal of the witnesses is that if as someone later on says, hey, this person was doing something illegal, he could come along and say, no, look, these witnesses will testify that it was a knife for a bris milah. Okay. Va'od amar Rabbi Eliezer says further, korsim eitzim lasos bechamim lasos barzel. Not only are you able to bring the knife on Shabbos itself, but on Shabbos itself, let's say you don't have a knife, then you could go ahead and do every step of the process, all the way back until cutting down trees, because by cutting down trees, you'll have some wood now, which will become, that you'll burn and become charcoal, that you're going to use to ultimately make metal, right? So mamish, the whole entire process. Obviously, this is like an extreme example, but the point is, it's not just the furthest thing, but really everything before that. However, Klal Am Rabbi Kiva disagreed and said, anything that could be done before Shabbos, Shabbos cannot push off Shabbos. Shabbos cannot be performed, meaning, so you could bring the knife before Shabbos, right? There's no need to bring the knife on Shabbos. The mul could go, drive to the place, walk to the place, take the wagon to the place, leave the knife there. And he says, Shabbos, it can't be done on Shabbos, before Shabbos, meaning the bris milah itself, which has all its malachos, or we'll see other activities which cannot be done before Shabbos. Those dochas Shabbos are able to push away Shabbos, right? So machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and Kiva, in terms of what everyone agrees, of course, the bris milah you are obligated to do on Shabbos if it falls out on Shabbos. But in terms of what can be done, Rabbi Kiva says only things that cannot have been done before. Rabbi Eliezer says everything up to including chopping down wood to get the process started. Okay? Ibailu, the Gemara asks, time of Rabbi Eliezer, when Rabbi Eliezer says that you should walk around with the knife exposed, is the reason mishum chibuve mitzvah? Is the reason? So again, he said in a time of sakana, when it's dangerous, you obviously have to cover it and you tell the witnesses. But when the first part of the lacha, he says you should walk around with the knife exposed. So is it mishum chibuve mitzvah? Is it simply a matter of wanting people to know how important the mitzvah is? So I'm walking around, look everyone, we're doing a bris. It's a big thing. Or is the reason you're walking around with it uncovered is to prevent someone from seeing you with a bag and thinking that you're carrying a book, which would be aser without an erev, right? So what's the reason that he says it should be uncovered? So the man of Kamina, what's the practical difference in this question? Because let's say it's a scenario where not a time of danger, it's a regular time, and a person's able to walk around with the knife, but they want to have it covered. So are they allowed to go ahead and cover it with witnesses? If the reason he says it has to be exposed is because of the love of the mitzvah, you want to show people how special the mitzvah is, then megula in mechuzalo, then you cannot, even if there are witnesses there, you can't cover it because you have an obligation to let people know you're going to bris. But if the whole issue is not because of the love and the publicity of the mitzvah, but rather because of suspicion, then covering it is allowed. Okay, what's the halacha? Okay, you hear the question? Yeah, Itmar. So Amar Rav Levi, lo Amras Relazar el chibuve mitzvah. Rav Levi says explicitly the purpose is to proclaim the love of a mitzvah. Therefore, even if witnesses know about it, you cannot go ahead and cover it. it. Okay, and there's a Bryce that supports this. We're on the next page in the article. Tananami Hachi, a Bryce which supports this. Mivia Migula, the Bryce that says you bring it uncovered, and then it adds ve'eno mivia mechusa, and you cannot have it covered. Right? It has to be uncovered, it has to be exposed, and it cannot be uncovered. There's like a double terminology over there, to Eliezer. And so the Rishonim understand the fact that there's this double terminology is to highlight the fact that no matter what, unless, again, it's a case of emergency, like there's danger, people will get arrested, you'll get killed if you do a bris milah, but otherwise, not only should be exposed, don't cover it. In other words, going out of its way to say that you should not, even with witnesses, you should not cover it. Okay, Amar Vashi, another proof, Masnisan Nami Daika Diktani. Our Mishnah itself also indicates this because it says, Uveshas sakana mechase al pei edim. It says only in the time of danger do you cover it in the presence of edim. Bisakana in, shelo bisakana lo. The straight implication is that it's only in the time of danger, and when it's not a time of danger, it's not allowed. Shema mina mishum chibuv mitzvah shema mina. So it comes out from all these sources that Rabbi Eliezer, who says the knife should be exposed, is because of the love of the commandment, and people will therefore see that someone's doing a bris milah, and it's an important thing, and has nothing to do with suspicion, and therefore you have no right to carry it around covered. You must carry it around uncovered unless it's a time of danger, Shema Mina, and we could bring that proof from the Mishnah itself. Okay, Tani Idach, we have another Bryce that says, Mivio Megula, Ve Mivio Mechusa, de Rabbi Eliezer. Again, Rabbi Eliezer says the knife should be exposed and not covered. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, no again Hayu B'Shasa Sakana, it was the practice at the time of danger, Mivien Mechusa Api Edim, that it would be brought covered with the knowledge, Al-Piyeda means the knowledge of Edim. Okay, so that Brisa is a little bit vague, as we'll see, in the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, and Ibailu, and therefore we ask the following question. Edim de Ka'amar, when it says that witnesses have to be aware of this, Ihu v'chad, is the person included? Right? Is the mohel who's carrying the knife, is he included? O Dilma hu vitrei. Or is it him and two others? Now, obviously, in a regular case of testimony, I can't testify about myself. It doesn't work. That's meaningless. The reason it's being asked over here, first of all, the terminology is vague, but more fundamentally, the idea is that over here, there's not a full-fledged testimony. There's not like someone is going to court, and the point is that people are going to start talking, and we need to counter that. So the question is, what level of countering is necessary? Is it just enough that the person themselves, which obviously is not going to be taken so seriously, but together with someone else, meaning having one other person, is that enough? So Tashma, we bring a proof from our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, the terminology was a little bit clear. It said, "V'sakana mechasehu al piedim." It doesn't say, as it did in the Brisa, that you bring it covered and then there's a knowledge of two edim. Rather, it says you should cover it. You, the mole, should cover it al pi edim in the presence of two witnesses. Right? So iyamras b'shlama hu utrei shapir. Right? If it's he should cover it and two witnesses are watching, it makes sense. El iyamras hu v'chad. But if it's only saying he and one other person, my edim. What does it mean that he should cover it in front of edim, implying there's two others? Right? So it would seem to be that you would need two additional witnesses, and the person himself is not enough. So Gemara says no. Shiru'uyim laha'id b'makom acher. When it says edim, it doesn't mean literally two other people. It just means people who are classically be accepted as edim, meaning someone who's not a relative, for example, or whatever criteria you have for a witness, that would be the criteria over here, but it doesn't necessarily mean two, and the Gemara leaves this question unresolved. Okay. V'odam Rabbi Eliezer. Now the Mishnah went further and said that Rabbi Eliezer holds that not only can you bring the knife, but you could go ahead and cut the wood to get the fire, to get the coals to make the knife, right? All the steps before. Tana Rabbanan. Okay, and now we have a Bryce that says like this. Bimkomo shel Rabbi Eliezer, where Rabbi Eliezer lived, where he was the Rav, hayu korsin eitzim lasos bechamim lasos barzal. They would actually, b'Shabbos, not only was this a default, they would do this. On Shabbos, if they had a bris that day, in the morning, the wood choppers would go out and cut it down, and then some make a fire, right? Some Nachronim explained, meaning it's you don't have an obligation. Meaning, one could say, like, why are you getting prepared? The point is, since my obligation to do a bris only begins on day 8, therefore, you're right. Technically, I could have done it, but halachically, I really, truly have no obligation, and therefore, my obligation starts now, and I can do everything. And they were doing so. Why? Because they wanted to show how important bris milah was, right? It wasn't enough. Imagine, I don't know about you. I heard it would sound like some very loud noises this morning. It sounded like gunshots, but yeah, it's Baltimore. Okay, whatever. I don't know, but imagine like early in the morning, Shabbos morning, it's a quiet shtetl, right? And all of a sudden you hear like timber and people are cutting down the wood, and all of a sudden there's like this big fire and you see big smoke everywhere, right? It's making a commotion. Okay, that was related to the gunshots. My point is, like, it's quiet, and all of a sudden there's a big noise. So it shows everyone, wow, there's a bris, and this is important, and a bris overrides Shabbos. Look how important a bris is, right? This was done in order to highlight how important it is. It wasn't just that they went rule like him; they went out of their way to do this. Okay, Bimkom Rav Yossi Haglili, in the place of Rav Yossi Haglili, Hayu Ochlin Basar Of Bechalav. They would go out of their way to eat chicken with milk. Right, so there is a machlok, right? So eating chicken, meat and milk is doraisa. The vast majority of Chazal went ahead and said eating chicken is going to be included. But Rav Yossi Haglili was of the opinion that chicken was not included. Okay, we don't paskin like him, but this was clearly a stage before it was like unanimously agreed that we do not eat chicken. But in his place, they would go out of their way to show that they rule like him, and they would therefore they would eat chicken together with milk. Okay. Levi Iklave Rav Yosef Rishba. Levi once visited the house of Yosef, the trapper of animals. And so obviously you go to this person's house, they're going to serve you some good, meat boards and charcuterie boards, etc., etc. They served him a peacock's head in milk. Okay, some whatever. It's not clear if it's a peacock, whatever. Some form of kosher chicken fowl with milk. In milk. Lo achal, he didn't eat it. When he came back home, or he goes back to Rebbe, his teacher, and he tells him what happened. Rebbe said to him, why didn't you excommunicate the household? Meaning, imagine you go to someone's house and they serve you, chicken and milk, right? I mean, so here's a big Rav, or Levi's visiting. He should have put him in Cherem, and that was what was normally done. Levi said, Asher Yehuda ben Beseira Hava, with the city of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. V'amina, and I told myself, Dilma Darish Lehu Karil Yosek Lili. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Again, this was predating when everyone agrees that we don't rule like Rabbi Yosek Lili, but he's living in the city of another major posek, and maybe that posek held like Rabbi Yosef Lili at this point, and therefore I wasn't going to put him in Cherem. It's not Rabbi Yosef Lili. Rabbi Yosef Lili says, Nemar lo sochlu kol nevela. The pasuk says, you shall not eat any nevela. Nevela is unslaughtered meat. Okay, v'nemar, and it says next to it, lo sevashal gedi b'chalev imo. You should not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Okay, and Chazal learned from there, anything which is included, anything where there's an obligation to shech, to slaughter, and if you don't, the food is aser. Okay, aser levashal b'chalav is forbidden to be cooked with milk. Right? What's the exception? So what would not be included in this? Fish. Right, so you're allowed to have salmon and cream cheese. Sfardim have, Sfardim are machmir about this, and they don't. But the simple read of the Gemara is quite clearly saying you could. Right, it's only if there's the issue of nevela. With fish, you don't slaughter fish, and therefore there's no issue of fish meat together with milk, right? And then, however, of sha'asr mishum nevela yachal yehe asur levashal b'chalav. So chicken, which is prohibited because of the fact that it is a carcass, maybe it should also be included in the prohibition of being cooked with milk. Tamalomer b'chalev imo, in its mother's milk. Yatsa of she'en lo chalev imo. This excludes the fowl which does not have mother's milk. Okay, so basically we learn from there. Rav Yosef learns that since a fowl does not have, there's no nursing, there's no mother's milk, therefore there is no prohibition of basar b'chalav. The chachamim that we go with agree to that in biblically, but they add rabbinically. There should be a prohibition, and therefore that is why we don't have chicken and milk. Again, it's not asur midaraisa, and there are some nafkaminas because of this. It's asur midrabanan. Rabbi Yosef says it's not even asur midrabanan; it's 100% mutter. Okay, don't eat chicken and milk, but there are some kulas that's sometimes invoked. Rarely, but I'm trying to think of like a good example where we would be mako maybe. Let's say a person had a chicken, so there's like a bunch of not well known things. So Parmesan cheese is you have to wait. Everyone agrees you have to wait. It's aged cheese. So sometimes happens people go out on Friday afternoon, or they have like a fancy whatever. They have a salad and they put some Parmesan cheese, and they'll have Parmesan cheese on Friday afternoon, and it's winter, right? They come home and they sit down for the Shabbos Suda and like, wait a second, I had Parmesan cheese. I'm allowed to have my Shabbos Suda. So again, you shouldn't do so deliberately. You should be careful not to. But after the fact, if you're having chicken at the meal, it's a chicken soup and chicken, not meat. There would be what to rely upon for Mishum Sudas Mitzvah, that even though it's not within the it's before the 6 hours elapsed, there'd be what to rely upon to go ahead and have your Shabbos Suda. Okay, because it's Rabbanan. If you're having steak or whatever for your Shabbos meal, we won't be able to do so because it's Doraisa. Right, so that's just one place where we would be theoretically makel, because the fact that chicken is asur midrabanan as opposed to asur midoraisa. Okay. Where did it come from? So if you stick around towards the end of Shas, so we'll be learning Chulin. But the Gemara very briefly, so it's a good day because we don't have so much more Gemara. But the Gemara talks about the fact that they waited between meals. They waited between meals, and it's quite clear that the standard. So the Gemara itself, fine. The Gemara says that they waited between meals, between meat and milk. Meaning you can't eat them together. That's midaraisa. Midarabanan, they said they waited between meals. That's codified. That's what the practice. The question is, what does between meals mean? So there's a bunch of opinions brought down already from the early Rishonim. Some say, well, finish your meal, bench. Wash your hands, clean your mouth out, go eat your next meal, and that kind of developed into some, which was a normative ruling of some waiting an hour, but then others said, okay, the standard meal back in the day was a time period of 6 hours, and that's where the idea of 6 hours comes from. And then you have the 3 hours, maybe it depends on the time period, maybe they had a shorter period of time between meals, but that's the 6 hours basically comes from that was the standard of meals. They didn't have breakfast, lunch, dinner. When they said meals, they typically had like a brunch-ish, and then like a dinner, and that was the entirety of their meals. So that's the 6 hours. Yeah. Okay. Amrav Yitzchak. Ir achas haisav eretz Yisrael shahayu osing Rabbi Eliezer. There was a city in Israel where they paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. They act like Rabbi Eliezer. Vayumesim izmanam, and they would die only in their proper time. Okay. So that terminology is a little bit tricky to say. What does it mean? How could whenever a person passed away, that's the proper time? But what it's an expression for saying that people did not die young. People died in old age, and they attributed that to Rabbi Eliezer. There was one time where the Romans went ahead and issued a decree that you were not allowed to circumcise, and quote unquote coincidentally, that city was not included in the ruling. So they attributed that to the fact that since they were so makpid, again, they were chopping down trees early Shabbos morning to show how much they love bris milah. So this was all an expression. So therefore, they were saved from this decree. Tanya, Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, call mitzvah shekiblu aleim b'simcha. Any mitzvah which the Jewish people accepted upon themselves with joy. Kigon Mila, like Mila, I rejoice over your word. This is David HaMelech speaking. Like one who finds abundant spoils. Okay, so the context of that chapter is that it is a reference to bris Mila, but the point is the pasuk reflects the fact that the Jewish people accepted bris Mila with abundant joy. Adayin osin osa b'simcha. They still perform this mitzvah with joy. Okay, so basically anything where the way first impressions are not like a silly thing. First impressions make a real difference. If when a person started something, it was done properly. A person starts a mitzvah, and it's not here we're speaking historically, but also a person starts doing a mitzvah, a person starts doing a minhag, and they do it joy, it's going to last. Joy creates a certain permanence. Any mitzvah that the Jewish people accept upon themselves contemptuously, kigon arayas, like the prohibited relationships. It says that the people were weeping by their families, and Chazal understand this. The Jewish people, after receiving the Torah, were upset because of many of the what we'll call incest. Different types of relationships between families were prohibited, and they were upset. Adayin osin osabik tata, they still observe them contemptuously. What's the proof? There's no marriage contract, which there's no fighting over. Okay, basically there's always like tension before a wedding, and this is a reflection of the fact. This is we're not even going to describe it as a punishment. It's a reflection of the fact that there is something like embedded into the mitzvah of marriage and all its related prohibitions that there's going to be something in the way. Something gets in the way because it never was really accepted with a state of joy. It was accepted begrudgingly. Okay. Tanya, I was telling Bryce, any commandment to the Jewish people gave themselves over to death, meaning they were willing to sacrifice their life over when there was a government edict, like idolatry or mila, it's something which is held firmly. Right? We spoke about this earlier. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs' observation that mitzvahs which a person committed them, like Pesach and Yom Kippur, are the most widely observed mitzvahs, even though they're most difficult. He says, not even though, that's precisely why. When people see the sacrifice, we say, I'll be more lenient. I'm not going to be so strict. And that will ensure people are going to observe mitzvahs. It's a mistake. It's a fallacy. When people are moser nefesh over it, it shows how important it is, right? That's what we spoke about in the context of muksa. Chazal upped their game on muksa. They made it more strict. He's like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Be more lenient. No. By being more strict, it shows how important it is. And that's what he says. Avodah zarah, idolatry, circumcision. Because the fact that earlier generations were willing to sacrifice their life over it, it made it that it was firmly held in the future in their hands. Any mitzvah which they were not so careful about when there was an edict, kigon tefillin. Apparently tefillin, something that was when there were edicts, the Jewish people did not keep tefillin so carefully. Therefore, it's still held weakly in their hands. Tefillin, unfortunately, is not something which is something which is not find me very rare to find a secular Jew who does not do a bris milah, but to wear tefillin is is not so something we take for granted. It's not something which we unfortunately even people who would ostensibly consider themselves Orthodox will not necessarily wear tefillin all the time, and that's a reflection of the fact that our ancestors did not take it as seriously. Okay, Dam Rav Yanai, I'll just mention a positive thing. Leon Albin, who we're sitting Shiva for this week, I learned this past week. He died in '98. We didn't. He every single morning he wore tefillin and davened. Whatever, he's a delegate. Whatever, he wasn't. Whatever. It just wasn't something I expected. But every single day he wore tefillin. I was just very, very pleasantly surprised to hear that. Very beautiful. Dam Rav Yanai. Rav Yanai says tefillin tzrichin guf naki glisha bal kanafayim. Tefillin need to be worn with a clean body, as Elisha, the winged one. We'll talk about why he's called Elisha, the winged one. Okay, Maya, what does it mean a clean body? What's the halacha? Amar Abai shlo yafiach behem. There is a prohibition to pass wind while wearing tefillin. Rav Amar shlo yisham behem. You're not allowed to sleep in them. But the bottom line is the fact that he has to single out Elisha being the one who does this well. That implies that other people were not keeping, and these are basic tefillin halachos. So clearly, people were not keeping halachos of tefillin very well, and that is the implication. Now let's learn the beautiful story of Elisha Bal Kanafayim. Why is he called Elisha, the winged one? One time, the Roman government issued a decree against the Jewish people. Anyone who wears tefillin, their head will be cut off, or literally his brain will be gouged. But Elisha didn't care. He wore tefillin, and he actually wore them publicly. And a certain official saw him. Elisha ran away. Okay, when he caught up, he took the tefillin off and held them in his hands. Keep in mind, if you ever saw someone tefillin from earlier generation, they were much smaller than our tefillin. Okay, and so he's able to hold them in his hands. He says, "What's in your hand?" I have the wings of a dove in my hands. He opened his hands, and sure enough, dove's wings, a miracle was performed, and dove's wings were there. That's what they nicknamed him, Elisha the winged one. Why did he say dove's wings? He could have said, like, I don't know, pizza? Like, what? Okay, whatever. Okay. Why did he say dove's wings? Or other birds, something? Because Jewish people are considered like a dove. The pasuk says, you'll be like the wings of a dove, covered with silver, and her pinions. Pinions are a part of the wing with brilliant gold. Just like the dove, its wings protected. It covers the whole bird, right? You ever see a dove? It covers the whole bird. So to the Jewish people, our mitzvos protect us. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Have a wonderful day.